Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Chavtet, a small daf, and normally when you see this much Ran or commentary, you expect that it's going to be extremely difficult. Personally, I don't think this daf is nearly as difficult as many other dafim. There's just the Ran has a lot to discuss, so let's not be intimidated. So the Gemara picks up at the bottom of Kafchet Amud Bet, and we go to the Mishnah, which is dealing with this idea of that there's a concept of pidyon and relatedly me'il, although that's not being focused on, with konamot. So the Mishnah says, somebody says that these saplings are korban, or this talit is korban, and that it says it has pidyon, it could be redeemed. But if you say it's a korban until it's burnt or they're cut, then ein la pidyon, it cannot be redeemed. So we'll have to understand why it changes when you say only korban for a limited time, why there is no pidyon. But the bigger point first to lay out, the foundation, which is going to come up later in a position, particularly that of Rabbi Meir, is that konamot yesh behen mishum mi'ilah, that if something is konam, is usher as a neder, and particularly if it uses the word konam, we'll discuss later if you use other words, but then it's drawing from the world of korbanot, and also particularly if it is forbidden not just to a particular person, but made forbidden to everyone, so in that way very much like a korban, that then it has a lot of those rules. So number one is there's a concept of mi'ilah, misuse, and like when you misuse something that's hekdesh, so you're not just violating the neder, there's actually this concept of mi'ilah. And number two, maybe more bizarrely, because you can have a concept of pidyon. You can transfer the status from one to another, the same way you could redeem something that belongs to hekdesh. If you think about a korban, for example, right? So pidyon could work in the sense of transferring ownership. This is owned by the Beis Hamikdash. I redeem it, so therefore I pay them for it, and somehow there's some sense of exchange. But pidyon can also work even when it's not about ownership. So, for example, if you sanctify an animal as a shlomim, it's not really owned by the Beis Hamikdash. That's really a question about what its status is. And nevertheless, when it gets a blemish, you can transfer that status onto money, right, onto an object. So this is true here as well. This is not a concept of ownership by the Beis Hamikdash, but if this thing is forbidden and forbidden to everybody, and it draws on the world of korbanot, there's a concept, number one, of mi'ilah, which we're not discussing, and a concept of pidyon, of transferring that status to something else. So that is the sort of presumption that we are working with. Again, we are going to understand that the case in the Mishnah of Konam is not a case of a real korban. It is a case of a neder, which really makes sense what it's doing here. And we are now going to focus on what this difference is. Why, when you say that it's only a konam until it's burnt or until it's cut down, when you limit the amount of time, why ein la pidyon, why there is no concept of pidyon here. So we pick up 4 lines from the bottom, 5 lines from the bottom. Harei netiyas elu korban. So it says if you say these shoots are korban, etc., until they're cut, ein len pidyon, they can't be redeemed. So the Gemara says ula olam. Does this really mean that forever they can't be redeemed? Why is this? What's this issue going on here? That they could not be able to be redeemed if we're working within a concept that konamot have mi'ilah and konamot have pidyon. Why is it different in this case? So Amar Bar Pada says, Bar Pada, P'ta'an chozeret v'kodshot, or P'ta'an chozeres v'kodshot, ad sheyiktatzu. Yes, you can redeem them, but when you redeem them, they become re-sanctified until they got cut down. Niktatsu, once these saplings are cut down, todan pamachat v'dayo. You redeem them once and you're done. So what the heck does this mean? It means the following. You said these saplings are konam ad sheyiktatsu, until they are cut down. Now, that can mean one of two things. I mean, you're probably saying, really? It seems to me pretty clear. They have this status until they're cut, and after they're cut, they don't have the status. Correct? That seems pretty clear what it means. However, we are going to see that Bar Pada actually says that's not possible. It's not possible that something could lose its status just bichdi, for naught, just magic. It stops being it. As the Gemara is going to say, if somebody said to a woman, you are my wife for today, and tomorrow you're not my wife, that wouldn't work. Let's say you said this animal is an ola today, but tomorrow it's not an ola. That wouldn't work. You can't have something, meaning I can say you own something, for today. You can have a kinyan lisman. Maybe ownership can be for a period of time, but something that's about something's fundamental identity and status, you cannot limit for a period of time. So if that's true, when you said this is a korban konam ad sheyiktzu until they're cut down, what did you mean? They can't stop having that status once they're cut down. So what do the words ad sheyiktzu mean according to Bar Pada? So he says, here's what the words mean. Ad sheyiktzu means ongoing. This will remain a konam until they are cut down. So therefore, if you go ahead and you redeem them before they're cut down, ad sheyiktzu means no, they will continue to be this status until they get cut down. So if you redeem them and remove that status, boom, it goes again. Because your vow is sort of constantly hovering over it and getting ready for it to reinstill that status until ad sheyiktzu. Let them continue to be a konam ad sheyiktzu. That's how he's reading the statement. So anytime you try to remove it, it happens again. You remove it, it happens again when you're podeh. Once you cut them down and you remove it, then it doesn't happen again, because that ongoing sort of effect is only until they're cut down. So that's how Bar Pada reads it. He reads ad sheyiktzu, because it cannot mean that it stops with its status when they're cut down, because you can't make something just lose its status automatically. You have to remove it. It can't just stop, right? A woman could be my wife, but then I need a get, right? Something could be a korban, but then I have to redeem it. It doesn't stop being an ola just because I say it's an ola for today. So this thing, when I say ad sheyiktzu, because it can't stop with its status of a konam automatically, ad sheyiktzu means ongoing. It's going to have this status, and even if it gets removed, it will have it again until it cut down. Once it gets cut down, it also doesn't lose it, but at least the ongoing nature stops. So when I redeem it after it gets cut down, then it doesn't happen again, okay? And that's how Bar Pada reads the Mishnah, and that's why ein lehem pidyon, meaning pidyon won't be effective, because you've set up a system, a mechanism where it'll constantly become rekonammed. Yes. You have a question?
Once you yiktzu and you're podeh, then that's fine.
Right.
That will work.
Right. So that's how he reads the Mishnah, ein lehem pidyon. So let's read that again. P'ta'an chozrot v'kodshot. You redeem them, and it doesn't work. And it works in the sense that the other object gets their status, sort of like Tamura. You get it on the other object, but you don't remove it from the first one. So it works that the other object gets the status, but then boom, this gets its status again. Try it again, boom, it gets its status again. That's what ad means, ongoing until. Okay? Ad sheyiktzu, until they're cut. Niktatsu, now once they're cut, they still have that status, but then the ongoing sort of mechanism stops. Podan pamachat v'dayo, then you redeem them. That's why ein lehem pidyon, they do have pidyon, but it's not effective until they're cut down. Okay, and that's all because ad sheyiktzu cannot mean its most natural meaning. That's what Bar Pada says. Ula says, kevan sheniktatsu shuv ein podan. No, once they're cut down, you don't have to redeem them. Their status stops once they're cut down. He reads ad sheyiktzu in the simplest way possible. These are a konam until they're cut down. Once they're cut down, they stop being a konam. Now, what does Ula think if you try to redeem them before they're cut down? The Gemara doesn't explain, and the Ran has two opinions. One opinion is he agrees with Bar Pada. Until you try to cut them down, until they're cut down, they constantly get re-status, rekonammed. I'll just call it that way, rekonammed. But then the other sort of, this is part of why there's a long discussion. The other approach of the Ran, which Tosfos takes for granted, is no. Once Ula can read the ad sheyiktzu in the natural way, that once they're cut down, the konam status stops. He has no need to read this idea like there's this ongoing mechanism of constantly being rekonammed. Ad sheyiktzu means it has a status until they're cut. Once it's cut, it loses its status. There's no idea that it would be an ongoing installation of that status. So therefore, according to Ula, if you redeem them beforehand, that would be the end of it. They would be redeemed. End of story. Is that clear? The whole key is what ad sheyiktzu means, right? Here are your, nitiyot, okay? So, you say, konam ad sheyiktzu, until they're cut down, okay? So da 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 here. You now the yiktatsu. This is yiktatsu. So what does this mean? So the ad yiktatsu. So basically, Barpada says, right? Barpada says that they can't, at this stage they can't lose their They don't automatically lose their status. There's nothing can automatically lose their status. So what does ad yiktatsu mean? It can't mean that it stops. The status goes away. Ad yiktatsu, according to him, must be it's ongoing. Ad yiktatsu. So therefore, you redeem them, they happen again, right? You try to redeem it, it happens again. Ad yiktatsu, it's ongoing. Once it's happened, it's no longer ongoing. Here, once you redeem it, that's my symbol for redeeming it. Once you redeem it, then it stops being kadosh. Then it becomes, I don't know, chulin or whatever we'll call it. But not kadosh, but konam, okay? But here, when you try, I don't know what better word than chulin is. Chulin, konam. Chulin, konam. You try to redeem it, but it's ad yiktatsu, ongoing until they get cut down, the status is going to apply. Here, you redeem it, and then you're done. But because ad yiktatsu cannot mean that it magic stops. You can't make the status stop unless you actively remove it. Ula disagrees. Ula says no. Once it's niktatsu, says Ula, then they're chulin automatically. You don't need to redeem it. Okay? Because ad means they have that status, and then boom, they lose the status. You don't need to do anything. Ad means until. So if ad means not ongoing, but if ad means until, then presumably he rejects this whole idea. Right? Because Parpada had to read ad meaning ongoing, that therefore he had this idea that it constantly regained that status. Because ad meant ongoing. Ula says on doesn't mean ongoing, it means until. It has that status static, and then it goes away at this stage. So according to that, if you removed it here, it would be removed. You'd be done. Okay, you would be able to remove it and be done with it. It wouldn't happen again. Because that just means until, it doesn't mean ongoing. The other explanation in the Ran is that no, Ula agrees it means ongoing and it stops automatically. But this is the easier way of understanding the debate. That Barpada says it means ongoing and it constantly regenerates because it can't mean until, because it won't happen automatically. And then when you get here, you have to actively remove it. Ula says it means until, so you don't have to actively remove it here. It stops automatically. And because it's just a static state here and not an ongoing state, if you were to remove it, it actually would stop being kadosh. Yes.
What's the nafkamina of the position of chozrot, kochot, nafkamina?
This remains usher the entire time, and anything you transferred it to also becomes usher.
That's not what I mean. What I mean is, what's the nafkamina between conceptualizing it that way and simply saying there's no kochot for chozrot? It's just in other words, the attempt to be potent.
Because it explains why does it not work. It doesn't work because why shouldn't it work? So the answer is it does work, but because you said ongoing, it as soon as it worked, it got reversed. Okay. If you just said it didn't work, we would say, why doesn't it work? Why doesn't Pidyon work? So the answer is Pidyon does work, but you set up a system that as soon as you're poded it, the thing becomes redeemed, the thing gets its status again. And because Pidyon does fundamentally work, the thing you were poded on also gets the status. So saying this mechanism is a big difference than saying it fundamentally doesn't work.
So is there a micro nanosecond?
No, it's instant. No, instant. I don't know. What? Ula does not require. No, it happens automatically because ad means until. It automatically ends over here.
So that's the difference between the two.
Yes. Well, there's both of these differences.
Still require pidyon.
Exactly.
Yes.
Barpada says it needs pidyon. Ula says it doesn't. Barpada says if you try to remove it, it gets sort of transferred, but then it reinstills. It takes the effect. And Ula says no. If you were to remove it, you'd be done. So according to Ula, according to this read of Ula, ein lehem pidyon is not so clear. Ein lehem pidyon. What do you mean ein lehem pidyon? During this period, it's yesh la pidyon. All right, you can redeem it. So ein lehem pidyon really means you don't have to be potent.
Exactly.
That once you get to this stage, it stops and you don't have to be
The
potent.
is the gemara.
Right. So that is the debate. Now there is so let's take a look at the Gemara, because now the Gemara spells out what's pushing Bar Pada, because Ula's read is a much more natural explanation of what would happen. So Amalei Rav Hamnuna, so Rav Hamnuna said, so kedusha shebehein lehechan halcha, where according to Ula did the kedusha? Notice the phrase the kedusha, right? So again, because we're talking in the world of konamot, where it draws on korban, we're using the idea of pidyon, so we're using these concepts of kedusha. Again, assuming we are talking about a konam and not about a real hekdesh. So kedusha sheben le'yanalcha, how did that just disappear according to Ula? If a person said, Isha, today you're my wife and tomorrow you're not my wife, below get, would she become not married without a get? Of course you need a get. You need to actively remove something that's about a status. So here too, if something is kadosh, if we were to look at the world of kedusha, something doesn't stop doing that without an active pidyon. So Amalei Rava, so Rava said, Mi kamadam is kedusha stamim l'kedusha saguf. How could you compare ownership of value to sanctity of value to sanctity of the essence of the goof, meaning something that is about status? The basic difference is opposed something that is about ownership. I'll just read it. Kedushas damim paka bichti, kedushas aguf lo paka bichti. Something that is about value goes away with naught. Something that is about the essence itself, the thing itself, does not go away with naught. So what does that mean? It means that the following. Here's something I can do to you. I can say, I am selling you my computer. You own my computer for a week. Okay? There is a concept of something of kinyan lizman, owning something for a time. So kedushas damim is like, let's say I said to the Beis HaMikdash, I am transferring my car. I'm giving my car over to the Beis HaMikdash. I know that they need to do some travel or whatever. I'm giving them my car for the week. Okay, so would it then stop at the end of the week? If it's fundamentally based on ownership, right? Even if there is a status about it, becomes kadosh. It's a kedusha that derives from ownership. So therefore, that is something that fundamentally you could limit. But something that is about identity. What is a clear example of a kedusha that's about identity and not about ownership? Korban. So if I say this is an ola today, it can't stop being an ola tomorrow. That's something that it's about something's fundamental status and identity. You need something active to change a status, right? You can't fundamentally limit. If it's all about who you are, what your identity is, that doesn't make sense that's like on a clock. There needs to be something that fundamentally changes identity, as opposed to a concept of ownership. So therefore, says he, so the idea that this woman is my wife, that's a status issue. That can't be on a clock. You're my wife until this time and then you stop. There has to be some event, something such that makes it, that changes that reality. I give her a get, I die, whatever. Okay, or a ritual or something, like I die or something that fundamentally changes in the circumstances, that changes the status, not just because I have set some clock on it. Okay, so therefore he says, so you can. So therefore the answer seems to be, now here's the interesting question. What do I think the story is about konamos? Are konamos a kedushas haguf or kedushas damin? So if you ask me, logically, it's not about ownership. Who owns, right? Who owns this these shoots, this talus? It's not about ownership. It's about a status of being asur. And the word konam draws on the word korban, right? Which is a concept that's about status, not about Perek habayis. Maybe that would be a word like cherem. So logically, I would have put konamos more into the status category. But nevertheless, right, it's all just drawing on that world. It's not really a korban. And number two is, when I'm talking about these saplings or this talus, right, it's not a real korban. I'm not going to be makri of these saplings in the Beis HaMikdash, right? If I were to really be makdish these saplings, if I said, netiot elu ola, Netiot or kalas zeh shlomim, right? It wouldn't be a shlomim or an ola. What it would mean is I'd have to take its value and use its value to go ahead and buy an ola and buy a shlomim. So since I'm talking about these objects, it's a little bizarre because conceptually it really is about status and not value. But because these are things that never themselves are used in the Beis HaMikdash, as a korban, it's being put in this world of kedushas damim. So the answer is that Barpada says, doesn't reject that. He says, no, you cannot automatically change the status, and therefore this has to be ongoing. Once you hit this thing, it doesn't go away. And then basically, who was it that Rav Hamnuna is saying, yeah, Barpada's got a good point. Ula, how does the status just magically disappear? And his answer is the status magically disappears because I consider this to be like kedushas damim, to be a type of a status that is not so fundamental core to something's identity. And if it's not a status that is core to the object's identity, you can limit it in time. So saying an animal is a korban or this woman is my wife becomes a core identity issue, and that you cannot put on a clock. But something like this talus is a konam that is not a core identity issue. That's a kedushas damim, and that can be put on a clock. And that's how come it can change at this point. Okay, Charlie, you've been waiting to say something.
Yeah, two things. There are times when time can cause the status of a korban to change.
Yeah, like what?
Such as a Pesach, when it gets too old or after.
Yeah, but that's only when you shecht it, so it's the combination. Anyway, but it's not automatically. I mean, the fact that if it gets too old, that doesn't cause its status to change. That more is like, it can't. Well, also, that's not just time. That's because now it's actually a different type of a thing. It's not a, you know what I mean? With the passage of time, this became something different. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just an arbitrary clock. Right now, it's not Ben Shana.
It was a clock the Torah created.
Well, yeah, but not just that. It's not. It's not after 10 days. It's when the actual animal becomes a 1-year-old animal. So It's actually a change of the thing itself, right? It's not just like, imagine like you had like, I don't know, some fruit that blossomed. You wouldn't say what changes its status is time. What changes its status is that it blossomed, it changed. You know, so it's really, I would say that that's really not about time per se. It really is about the thing. Yeah.
And a second way, in this coming week's Haftarah, we have Yiftach declaring something to be an Ola that can't be an Ola.
Right. So we've discussed Yiftach again in his Nedarim. Yes.
I would have thought that a korban was a matter of ownership in the sense that you have me'ilah, which is a concept of theft.
No, so me'ilah, so again, same way you have a me'ilah by Nedarim. Me'ilah, there are two concepts of me'ilah. One is a theft concept, and the other is a trespass and a misuse concept. And although there's a famous Reb Chaim that tries to make all me'ilah about theft, the actual more pshat is that all me'ilah is an aspect of trespass, of misuse, and theft is a form of trespass. Okay, but certainly me'ilah in the context of konamot, of Nedarim, is not about theft, who you're stealing from, it's about misuse. And if you think about it, right, if I've got a shlomim and I sanctify it, it's still my animal, it's just my animal that now I have to bring as a korban. Okay, that is the difference between kedusha shadam and kedusha aguf. So basically what you have here is a fascinating issue. Can you say this is a konam until a particular time? Bar Pada says no, you cannot set a clock to that. If that's its identity, then that's got to remain its identity unless you actively remove it. And Ula says you can set a time, and the explanation, and as I said, the Gemara frames it as kedushas damim. What that means in the context of konam is, I would say that it's something that relates to, it is a status of the object, but it's not an identity of the object. Something that really goes to an identity issue, that cannot be put on a clock. This is a status, but it could be a time-bound type of a status, okay? And therefore it can change, you know, and you can put it on a clock according to Ula. Now the Ran says, I don't get this Gemara. I don't get why the Gemara assumes that it's like can't believe that you could make this thing go away automatically. The Ran says, what are you talking about? There are all these types of nedarim that you say, this is a neder until this particular time. All of a sudden, the Gemara wakes up and realizes that there's a neder on a clock. It happens all the time, right? Remember the Gemara before that said, konam, you know, you can't be neder from this until Pesach, right? And that works. So why is it different than any of this? Okay, so let's see what the Ran's answer is. This is important to realize that not all nedarim fall into this konam, hektish, pidyon type of a category. So if you look at the Ran, he says like this. He says, so he says the line that says the word dibikonamot, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down in the wide lines.
The widest lines?
The widest lines. No, on Chavter Amud Aleph. Yeah, the widest lines. Dibikonamot. People see that?
Dibikona, the first one.
Yeah. So he says like this. He says, if dibikonamot askinan, heichi salka adaite dikonamos lo paka bichti. How could you think that konam doesn't just, you know, can't just stop based on a clock? That you should, you know, you should be usher until Pesach if you go to your father by Sukkot time. So it says it applies, the Isser applies until Pesach. You put it on a clock. You said until Pesach. After Pesach, it automatically goes away. Kachi Rav Yonazal. The Tirate, and he answered, that's when it's a personal one. You say for your wife, you are forbidden. When it's personal for a particular person, that's more the world of a standard neder. That's less the world of konam / korban. Okay? Therefore, it goes off automatically. Avokonam klali, a general one that applies to the whole world, that it's forbidden to everyone. Once it becomes usher to everybody, you use the word konam. It's usher to everybody. That sounds a lot like a real korban, because it's so much like a korban. It's everybody. And the idea of konam, nafkamina number one is you could be podeit, like your podeit korbanot. Okay? The tafis pidyonim kektish, kadamar of meir l'kaman, ein bin amoder, hachidam yisrael and techamir v'lo pakach b'chti. We also assume, at least Barpada assumes, that it doesn't just go off automatically. So the point is, right, this is an amazing Gemara. We are now, Neder has now catapulted us into this world of korbanot. We're talking about hektish and pidyon and me'ilah. So the question is, really? All Nedarim are like this? And the one says, no, not really all Nedarim. It's a Neder like this, but you use the word konam and you made on everybody. But if you only made it for a particular person, you'd be more in the Neder world. You would not really be in this hektish, pidyon, me'ilah world. Well, he's quoting Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay? So, and you have to say it, because some Gemaras talk about konam and me'ilah and whatever, and other Gemaras never heard of it. Other Gemaras completely oblivious to all of these types of issues. So the basic point is not all, only very particular types of Nedarim, particularly if you use the word konam and you make it usher on everyone, starts having this type of korban type of a discourse. Okay, so what we're saying is when you use konam, and when it's usher to everybody, and it's like a korban, then we could talk about pidyon, but then we could also say like barpada, well then it doesn't stop automatically. Other Nedarim maybe, but not this one. And Ula says, yes, it does stop automatically. It's like Kedushas Damin, it's not like Kedushas Haguf. Okay, now we continue. Okay, now you understand why it's why there's so much Ran. So now the Gemara says like this. Amalei Abaye.
What's the alien to Tafis pidyon?
Alim, strong.
Okay.
Alim.
You were saying you could actually do pidyon during the interim before they get cut down.
You could do what? Pidyon?
And
yes.
You would donate that to the.
Well, you wouldn't donate it. It's not really again temple. It would. I would say it would. No. Because we're not talking about real hektish. The thing you were podit with would have the same status of being forbidden, but this thing would stop being forbidden. Right? If we're talking about pidyon by konam, not by a real hektish. Right. So if I say konam, this is asur akulei alma, and then I'm going to be podit on this, then this becomes asur to everybody, and this becomes mutter. Nothing is owned by the Beis Hamikdash, right? It's like, that's okay. So because we're just drawing on that world, but we're applying it in a world of Nedarim.
But according to Ula, if you didn't do the opinion during that period until it was cut down, then it's all just canceled. The whole
when it gets cut down, yeah. Okay. So now the Gemara says like this. Okay. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye now challenges this idea that Kedushas Haguf can't be time bound. He wants to be even more lenient than Ula, than the Gemara suggested. Kedushas Haguf lo paka bichti. Are you telling me that Kedushas Haguf, a sanctity of the very essence, doesn't go off automatically with naught? V'hatani, we taught in the Brisa. Sure ze ola kol shloshim yom ulachar shloshim yom shlamim. If you say this ox is an ola for 30 days, and start after 30 days, it'll become a shlamim. Okay, kol shloshim yom ola ulachar shloshim yom shlamim. That works. That's completely mind-blowing, right? So if I bring this animal as a korban within the first 30 days, it's an ola. If I bring it as a korban after the first 30 days, it's a shlamim.
That's a terrible challenge.
It's a terrible challenge. Yes. I think it's a great challenge.
No, I'll tell you why. Because
it continues
in the world of Kedusha.
That's true. So it is in the world of Kedusha.
So it's not. So it is sort of a terrible challenge.
No, I wouldn't say terrible because it's about something's identity.
It's reducing its sanctity at the end of 30
Right, exactly. And I don't think. All right. I don't think it's terrible. It is true that it doesn't stop being a korban altogether. Okay, but still, if the idea is that you can't just change something's identity automatically,
no, it's a fundamental.
I understand.
Identity. I know.
I understand. Okay, but yes, it is different. You could have said that maybe it's different as long as it retains some status in the general world, even a different status. You could have said that, but it's still a big chiddush that something can stop, one identity of a korban and acquire another korban identity, even, as Charlie points out, if it's a lesser kedusha, right?
If it were a shlom,
all right, we're going to get the reverse. We're going to get the reverse. But yes, it is true. You could have sort of said, okay, I can see the point if it remains in that world. But, still, even that to me is a big chiddush. So let's see what the Gemara says. Gemara says, Amai, Kedusha's a gufninu. Why is this? This is a Kedusha of the goof. It's a very sort of status of its identity. Upaka bichti, and it just goes away, the Ola status to be replaced with a Shlomim status. So Gemara says, Hacham ma'askin and the Amar lid may. You're not really sanctifying this as an Ola. You're sanctifying it for its value. Meaning what you're going to do is you're saying, and the Rishonim say the animal has to have a mum, because if the animal is unblemished and you say let it be for the value of an Ola, it gets an automatic upgrade if the thing itself could be used for an Ola. But assuming it's got a blemish and it can't be used for the korban itself, and you say let this be for the value of an Ola or for an Ola, it means I'm going to use the proceeds of this to buy an Ola. And therefore, since it's not the thing itself, since it's that the proceeds are going to be used, it is not so much about its very core identity, because this itself won't be used in an Ola, and therefore that aspect can be changed. So it's not a Kedushas Haguf, it's a Kedushas Damim. So the Gemara says, Ihachi, if that's true, which is not Pshat of the Breita, but okay. Ihachi, if that's true, says the Gemara, Ema Seifa. Look at the end of the Breita. If you reversed it, you said La'achar Shloshim Yom Ola. After 30 days, it'll be an Ola. Ume'achshav Shlamim, and now it's a Shlamim. That also works. I mean, we don't have the punchline, but the point is that also works. So you start with a Shlamim and you end with an Ola. It also works. Now that's even less of a chiddush, as Charlie said, because then you're going to a higher level of kedusha. That would be something that would be more obvious you could do. Although it is a different identity point, it still is a higher level of kedusha. So the Gemara says, if one of these is talking about the actual Kedushas Haguf, the thing itself as an Ola and Shlamim, and the other about Kedushas Damim, you use its proceeds. That's why you needed to give me two, because you gave me two to tell me, don't try to say this is all just talking about Kedushas Damim. I'm going to give you two cases, so it's clear that I'm talking about all scenarios, even a scenario of Kedushas Haguf, that even that can change. Because I would have thought to say, Kedushas Haguf lo paka bichti, that if it's about the very thing itself being a korban, that won't change automatically or go away. Kedushas Damim paka bichti. If it's just about its value, that can go away after time or change. Amtu lahachi, because of that, Tanatarti, it had to tell me too, to make it clear we're talking about all cases, whether it's Kedushas Damim or Kedushas Haguf. So because it has two cases, the simple pshat of that is that we're talking even about Kedushas Haguf, and that shows that even Kedushas Haguf can change. But if both the case, whether it's Shlamim and then Ola, or Ola and then Shlamim, are two scenarios of Kedushas Damim where it's only the value and the proceeds, if that's true, why would you have to say two? And especially, as Charlie points out, the second case is less of a chiddush. The first case is it can go from an Ola to a Shlamim. So you've already told me you can go from an Ola to a Shlamim. Okay, Mikdusha Kalu, Mikdusha Chamura. So from starting from a Shlamim and then going to an Ola, so Tzrich Lemeimar, would you have to tell me? Okay, so because the second case is less of a chiddush, it goes from a Shlamim to an Ola, gets upgraded. It says it's one thing if the second case is there to tell me we're talking about all cases, whether Kedushas Haguf or Kedushas Damim. But according to you, that you want to only have to talk about Kedushas Damim, who needed the second case. So Rabbi wants to argue that even by Kedushas Haguf, you can put that on a clock. Now, presumably not the case about marrying a woman for a day. Okay, so the Ron discusses that. The Ron says,
"Can we have a case where the guy goes to these
yes, but then he would divorce them. Not that it would actually just be a kiddushin for a day." So the Ron says, even according to Abaye, right? Abaye is only sort of limiting this to something like, to something like a korbanot in the world of hekdesh, which can all be done b'dibur and whatever. Anyway, but nobody is arguing about the case of kiddushin. But nevertheless, Abaye says that at least in the world of Kadomot and Hekdesh, he wants to argue that you actually can have a status, even a Kedushas Haguf, just for a time period, okay, which is a big Chiddush. And yes, as Dov correctly says, this case is at least it's transferring from one korban to another, but it sounds like Abai would even be prepared to say you could just stop. It could be an Ola for 30 days and afterwards nothing. And you could go ahead and, at least if you get it within the first 30 days, bring it as a korban, and afterwards maybe it's total chulin or something. So that's a pretty radical position. That's what Abai is arguing. 1 minute. So those that don't want to say that no, you can't do that by a real Kedushas Haguf, how would they go ahead and explain the two cases of the Breita? So let's take a look, and then we'll take the question. So the Gemara says, Leimatavi Tufta de Bar Pada. So maybe this already, Abai says, at least at the Pshat level, this is going so far to say that there's even a Kedushas Haguf can go off Bichti. Maybe, you'll say, no, it's all Kedushas Damim. Okay, I don't know, there are two cases, Zu Vein Tzarech Lomer Zu. Maybe you could explain this bright as all Kedushas Damim. I, Abai, want to say it's telling you even Kedushas Haguf goes off Bichti. But minimally, I want to go even further with the Ula approach. But minimally, it goes against Bar Pada. It shows you that a status can change automatically, right? Doesn't it show you that? Yes? Everybody with me here, right? So Lema to have a chufta de Bar Pada. Let it at least be a challenge on Bar Pada. Damar lo paga kedusha bichti. I want to take Ula even further and say even Kedushas Gufkin goes off Bichti. But even if this thing is talking about Kedushas Damim, it should be a challenge to Bar Pada, because Bar Pada says that doesn't go off, and this Breita says it does go off. So how do you explain it? So Amar of Papa, Bar Papa says to you, Amar L'cha Bar Pada, Bar Papa would say, Hachi Kamar. Here's how to read the Breita. Im lo amar me'achshav shlamim la'achar shloshim yom ola have. Okay, now, so let me actually take a pause here a minute, because we've got two parts of this Breita, and we didn't explain the first one according to Bar Pada either. So the first Breita said, if you said, right, Kol Shloshim Yom Ola, and then it's a Shlamim, okay? So the Breita says that works. And then the other one said, if you said Shlamim, if you said La'achar Shloshim Yom Ola, La'achar Lamed Ola, Me'achshav Shlamim, and it also worked. Okay? So you have these two cases in the Breita. So it seems like it is going from one Kedushas Haguf to the other, and it seems like it's going even further than Ula. The way, if you want to take a more sort of moderate approach to Ula, and it only works with Kedushas Damim, you could say, even though it's two cases and you don't really need to, but nevertheless, we're talking about Kedushas Damim. The value was for an Ola, the value was for Shlamim, the proceeds, and so on. You could still explain that the status changes, that it's a status change of Kedushas Damim, not of Kedushas Haguf. But so that's in terms of the Ula. Ula says, yes, status can go off after a period of time. This Breita is a very big support to Ula. This Breita might even suggest even a Kedushas Haguf can go off after time, but minimally a Kedushas Damim can change after time. That's how it works for Ula. How does it work for Bar Pada? So the Gemara is focusing on this line. But the first thing is, well, what do you do about the first statement here? How does the first statement work for Bar Pada? Right? How does any of it work for Bar Pada? Some Kedusha is changing automatically. So what the Ran says, this isn't in the Gemara, but what the Ran says is, well, this part of the Breita we would have explained when it says 30 days it's an Ola and then a Shlamim. For Bar Pada, what that means is that if you redeemed it during 30 days, okay, you redeemed this thing, it was an Ola. If you had done nothing, it would have remained an Ola straight. But if you redeemed it during 30 days, then at day 30, the Shlamim status kicks in.
The redeeming is like the Katsitsa.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, the redeeming is like the redeeming here, except you didn't say it would automatically be a Shlamim. The Shlamim happens after 30 days. This is day 30. Okay? So therefore, yes, it says it goes from an Ola to a Shlamim, but that would mean, the way Bar Pada would explain it, if you redeemed it. Okay. Now, presumably, you could have said the same thing here: Shlamim and an Ola. After you redeem it, it then becomes an Ola after 30 days. But if we want this to mean something else, what do you do with this case here, according to Bar Pada? Okay, that Shlamim and an Ola, if it doesn't change automatically, and the Gemara says sort of solves it by a reread of the Breita. The Gemara says like this. So let's read the answer again. Leimatav tufta de Bar Pada. So the Amar lo paka kedusha b'chti. Amar of Papa, Amar lecha Bar Pada would say to you, Hachi Kamar. Im lo amar me'achshav shlamim, then la'achar shloshim yom ola have. No, it says like this. You said la'achar shloshim yom, let it be an ola. The Brisa said if you say la'achar shloshim yom ola ume'achshav shlomim, it works. But Barpadas rereads the Brisa to say if you said la'achar shloshim yom ola and you didn't say me'achshav shlomim, then it'll become a ola la'achar shloshim yom. If you did say me'achshav shlomim and you didn't redeem it, then that status of shlomim would continue. Lo paka bichti. Right? This is Barpadas. Lo paka bichti. Okay, so if you said just la'achar shloshim yom ola, that would work, la'achar shloshim yom. If you added me'achshav shlomim, then you're stuck with the shlomim status because once it has one status, it doesn't go away by itself. All right, so now the Gemara is saying if that's all he's saying, that if you're saying la'achar shloshim yom ola, it works. Isn't that obvious that you can sanctify something la'achar shloshim yom? Right. So that's the next point of the Gemara. So let's take a look. Like a man can say to a woman, marry me after 30 days that she's married. Even if the money that was given for the kiddushin is no longer around. Okay, so basically, according to Bar Pada, he rereads the Brita. Things, statuses don't change. Even kedusha's damim doesn't change. And the only thing that it's Brita is telling you is you can sanctify an animal la'achar shloshim yom. Okay, the same way you could marry a woman la'achar shloshim yom. So the Gemara says, Pshita, of course. Okay, now I want to say, I need to tell you, okay, well, I guess let's read it and then we'll unpack it. Lo, tzricha, you need it, the hadrabe, that I said, let this animal be an ola after 30 days, and then before 30 days were over, I changed my mind. Am I still bound by it? Okay, so it says, the chiddush is that I am bound by it. Hanicha, so the Gemara says, that's good. Leman da'amar eino chozeret. That if you said something should take effect after 30 days, like if I marry this woman and I say, you should be married to me after 30 days and she accepts the ring, that can she change her mind but before the 30 days is up? So there's a debate. So if you say she can't change her mind, then if I sanctify an animal also for after 30 days, I can't reverse it. But the opinion that says that the woman can't change her mind before day 30, so Michael and so why would by the case of sanctifying an animal, why would I not be able to change my mind? So the Gemara says no. This is the chiddush. Even if you say that a woman could change her mind, here it's different. That by saying something is holy, is giving something over to God with my words, is like physically handing something over to another person. Now, what the heck does all of this mean? Well, let's sort of start to unpack this. So we'll start, I guess, with this last case. So first of all, normally saying my words count like handing over explains why I don't need an active kinyan for hektish. If I say, Harei zeh lebeda kabayis, okay, then you could come and say, what act of kinyan did Beta Kabayis do? If I wanted to say, Harei zeh leCharlie, would you own this, Charlie?
I need to do a kinyan.
You need to do a kinyan. I need to put it in your property. You need to pick it up. Saying Harei zeh leCharlie doesn't do anything, right? I need Mesira Lahedyot. I need to give it over to you physically. You need to take possession of it. So why, when I say Harei zeh lebeda Kabayis, does it work? Well, that's the principle of Amiraso legavara kimisiraso lehedyotami. Saying something belongs to the Beis Hamikdash is like physically handing it over. Okay. Now, of course, you could say, obviously, that's how you're makdish something with your words. But again, here's the difference. There are two types of hekdesh. One is about something's identity. If I want to say this animal is a korban, you don't use the idea kimisiraso lehedyot. I'm not handing it to the Beis Hamikdash. I'm changing its identity, and I'm doing that with my words. But when I want to donate this to the Beis Hamikdash, you're thinking in the world of ownership, right? You're not thinking in the world of status. You're thinking about the world of ownership. So how would I donate this to the Beis Hamikdash? Maybe I would have to drop it off at the Beis Hamikdash. Maybe I have to transfer it. No. Saying it is like the act of physically transferring it when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash. That's that principle. Great. All that tells me is I don't need a Masa Kinyan. My words count. What does it have to do with my ability or inability to be Choseh, right? When I marry a woman and I say, you married me after Shloshim Yom, she can be Choseh. Even though I gave her, no, I can't get my ring off. I gave her here. I said, Harei mikudeshet li berekorder zu la'achar shloshim yom. Okay, and I physically give it to her. She could be choser. Okay, If I say, Harei zel beis hamikdash lachar shloshim yom, fine, let it be like I gave it to the Beis HaMikdash. I also gave it to this woman. But the woman can change her mind before 30 days. So why can't I change my mind also within 30 days? Just because it's Kimisira does not explain why I can't change my mind. Dov thinks he has an answer.
It's not parallel.
Yeah?
It's not parallel.
Why not?
Because you're making the statement to the woman and she's changing her mind. You're making the statement to the Beis HaMikdash. Right. Who's changing their mind? The Kadosh Baruch Hu, the animal?
Okay, but when we say she can change her mind, I can also change my mind. If I say Harei Mekudeshet Li Lachar Shloshim Yom and I give it to her, I can also change my mind within 30 days. Okay, it's true. You're right. It's not exactly parallel. I didn't present that wasn't it, but you're right. But I can. So if I can change my mind within 30 days, why can't I change my mind here within 30 days either? But you're right. You need to say that to make it parallel. Right, okay, but if I can change my mind, why don't I give her this? So even though my Amira gave this to the Beis HaMikdash, if it doesn't take a place within 30 days, if it doesn't take effect, why can't I change my mind?
There's something different. In the case of the woman, there's actually a kinyan. In the case of the Beis HaMikdash, it's just words and things.
Right, so that even more that I should be able to change my mind. But I can. So the Ran says you're right. Logically, it's not obvious just because you have this principle kimisira, but what it's sort of saying is sort of the flip of what Dov was saying, because all I had was words, and my words are so powerful that they are the same as a physical transfer, then they're even more powerful than a physical transfer. Like there's just so much power in that, that if mere words can do it, then it just shows how powerful that act is, and that therefore it locks me in. And it's as if I said, if you want what the parallel would be if it were between people, it would be like I said, me'achshav. If I say Harei Mekudeshet Li me'achshav ulachar shloshim yom, starting now, if it's starting now, then there's no backing out. Okay, so here too, if the relationship with Hektish is so powerful that as soon as I give it over, it's like I said me'achshav and I can't back out. Okay, so that's Chiddush number one, that when I say Achar Shloshim Yom, it's an Ola, the Chiddush is that I can't back out. Now, I want to go back to Chiddush number two, which the Gemara had said earlier, Afilu Nisachlu Hamaos, which is not maybe as much of a Chiddush. What does that mean? If I say to a woman, Harei Mekudeshet Li, the recorder Zo, La'achar Shloshim Yom, or let's say, then even if the recorder no longer exists, she's married. Why? Because if we don't go through with the Kiddushin, she'll have to pay me back for it. So in a sense, the value of that recorder still resides by her, okay? And she would have to give it back to me. So the kinyan still, to some degree, the kinyan was the transfer of that object, the transfer of that value. The kinyan still exists in the world. She still has that thing, and if she doesn't have the physical thing, she has the debt of that thing. She has the value of that thing by her. That is different than if I had a star, and I wrote, Harei Mekudeshet Li with this star, and I gave it to her, La'achar Shloshim Yom, and the star got destroyed before 30 days was up. Okay? There is no remnant of the kinyan that exists. There's no star anymore, right? And since the kinyan, the actual thing that was the act that will create the change of status, has no remnant, then the kinyan doesn't take a place, La'achar Shloshim Yom. So here's another example. If I said, take this sefer and bikon it lachar shloshim yom. If on day 30 the sefer's in your house, it works. If on day 30 this sefer is like in the middle of the street, it doesn't work. Because when the kinyan is supposed to take effect after 30 days, there has to be some aspect of that act of kinyan present to allow it to take effect. So that's why. So that's normal. Now, how come? So by kiddushin, afilu nisachlu hamos, even if the money isn't around, it still takes effect because you would have to give me the money back. Why by hektish, when I say harezu ola la'achar shloshim yom, does it still work? Where's the remnant of the kinyan? Where's the still act of the kinyan present la'achar shloshim yom? So it's a trick question, or not really a trick question, because what's the kinyan? The act of the kinyan is nothing physical. It's just words. So because it's all by words, right, because it's all non-physical, there doesn't have to be any part of the kinyan present. When the kinyan is demonstrated through some type of a physical reality, it's in my possession, I have the star, I have the money, or whatever, that physical reality still has to be present. When it's all done just by my words, right, then it's all abstract, then it can take effect la'achar shloshim yom, even though there's nothing remaining of it. I don't have to say the words again because it really isn't about some physical reality that's being created. So those are two chidushim about la'achar shloshim yom ola, because transferring something to the Beis HaMikdash is effected by words. And therefore, number one is that means it's so powerful that you can't back out. And number two, it means there doesn't have to be any remnant of the kinyan, because there was no real physical reality of the kinyan to begin with. So there doesn't have to be any of the remnant of it for it to take effect.
You have the animal, which is a physical object, right? So you need to aklu hama'ot, so they're gone, but there was still a debt,
right,
as it were.
Right.
So here too, let's say the animal's killed.
No. The animal is the object that's being possessed. It's not the act of the kinyan. Nidachlo Mos is focusing on what to find the act of the kinyan. The parallel to that would be, is it in your chutzner? Other types of things that reflect that act.
So it's totally appropriate that conferring the status of something to the Gavoa is purely spiritual in the sense that it's only mediated by language.
Right. Well, that is exactly why also it's so powerful, the whole relationship to Konamot here, and there's all this discussion, and it's a good point, of Amir Gavoa just once gets us back to that world where everything here is being done by speech, right? It's all these everything is, it's a world of ideas and of speech, right? And not of these physical things, and that's exactly it. And why Konamot then slide into this world of korbanot.
I want to make sure I'm also holding on to the most basic idea. Every neder by definition has to have some type of konam word or key.
No. Now the question that the Ran asked at the beginning of the Masechet is, if I said pat ze asur alai, it's a neder. Now, is it because it's a yad l'konam and implicitly the word konam is there? Or no, maybe a neder exists without borrowing the world of korbanot. It could borrow from the world of korbanot, but it doesn't have to. So those are the two possibilities of whether konam is always an idea that's present.
Track of that piece.
Yeah, well, it's only been a month. I don't know why. Okay, anyway, so anyway, I wanted to say again, repeat a point I said before. This idea of Amir Gavoa Masira Hediot, and this idea, can I back out the kinyan, very much puts us in this world of kinyan, of transactions transferring ownership, right? Normally, if I say says Ola, that's not transferring ownership. It's about kedushas haguf. It's about giving it its identity. But remember, we have said that in order to make this fit our model, this is talking about kedushas damim, that the thing has a mum, is not really going to be used as a korban. It's just that it's giving that value of it to go for the proceeds of it. So once you're in the kedushas damim world, you can talk about amir gavoa, kol shloshim yom, can you back out, not back out. You can use those models of those transaction types of models, right? Those are more relevant in the world of kedushas damim, where the hektish idea is rooted more in an ownership idea than in a status idea.
Do you have any sense, I know the Gemara might be working or not working hard to emphasize that it's not about ownership, it's about status, and the comparison is between kedushat isha and an animal to the Beit HaMikdash. But it's troublesome.
You mean about how we think about kiddushin? Yeah. So let's bracket that till we get to Maseches Kiddushin. Okay, so now I want to just say one more thing here, though. I mean, maybe this will confuse you, but I'll say it very quickly. The Ran points out that's the reverse of, the joke.
God should be sensitive,
The joke is after a guy gives a speech, somebody goes up to the podium and looks like he has note cards. Yeah. In one place, he's got something in on the margin. He's written, "Argument weak, speak loudly." So, so anyway, all right. The Ran says that part of the chiddush here, by the way, about kedusha lo paka bichdi, is that even if you started by saying, if you remember the second case, you first said la'achar shloshim yom ola, and then you said me'achar shlamim. So he says, here's the chiddush. Even though you said la'achar shloshim yom ola, so this was in place before you placed the status of the shlamim. And even though the shlamim status is a weaker status, so these are two good reasons to think that it could work. Number one is you didn't allow the shlamim to define. You first put this stopping thing in place, right? You first already established that you already said that starting at this point, it's going to be an ola. That was stage number one. And then stage number two, you said, for the first 30 days, let it be a shlamim. So maybe you think, oh, that'll really work because I've already got the new status in place, and the new status is even a higher status. So maybe you can start this way and then get upgraded. And, and I've already sort of put a stopper over here before I introduce the shlamim. So maybe you would think that even according to Bar Pada, that could work. And the Gemara is insisting that no. According to Bar Pada, he is so insistent that a Kedusha Stamim cannot change, that even if you set up that whole mechanism in this type of a way, even that doesn't work. And the only way, according to Bar Pada, to work La'achar Shloshim Yom Ola is if you didn't say Me'achshav Shlamim. Once you put in the Me'achshav Shlamim, it's going to be a Shlamim, and that can't change. Okay, we'll end here, yeah.
What do you mean by saying this is in the area of money, not of goof?
Because the Gemara...
You got from the Ola to a Shlamim?
Either way, because the Gemara said litmei. The simple sense is it's goof. That the animal, you're talking about really the status of an animal. Right. The Gemara said, the Gemara changed the case. The Gemara said there was a case that you said, I'm going to use the value and the proceeds.
So does the value change if it's an Ola to a Shlamim?
No, but what changes is how you use the proceeds.
Oh, you'd use it for an Ola.
Exactly.
Is there a distinction whether the animal has